They fined me $1,200 for an unapproved mailbox color, even though the shade came from their own paint deck. 3 certified letters later, I found the clause they'd buried on page 63. It wasn't a rule. It was a fee scheme. Welcome to my channel. I'm Mark Ellison, a civil engineer out of Polk County, Georgia, and I've spent 15 years designing subdivisions that were supposed to build community, not crush it. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what really goes on behind those HOA gates. And tell me, where are you watching from? I like knowing which part of America's fighting the same quiet war. I live in Birch Hollow, a planned community of 92 homes wrapped around a man-made lake. My wife, Jenna, and I moved here after her diagnosis 3 years ago, stage 2 lymphoma. We thought calm water and clean sidewalks would help her recover. The HOA brochure promised neighbors who care. Turns out they cared mostly about dues. The first citation arrived in March, printed on heavy cream paper that smelled like toner and vinegar. Violation 03-112. Unapproved mailbox color. Penalty $1,200. I ran my finger over the embossed seal and laughed. But when I called the number, the manager, a woman named Deborah Holt, said, "Mark, you can appeal at the next board meeting if your account is in good standing." Translation: pay first, talk later. That night, Jenna coughed through her tea and said, "Don't start another fight, please." She remembered the zoning battle I'd taken on at my old job. I promised her I wouldn't. But something about that paper, its smug typography, the way violations sat in 16-point bold, made my jaw lock. 2 weeks later, Deborah showed up in a red SUV, clipboard out, taking photos of our front porch. I walked out barefoot, coffee mug in hand. "Morning, Ms. Holt," I said. "Everything okay?" She didn't look up. "Your porch light is 65 watts. CCRs specify 60. You measured it?" "We have inspectors." "Who?" She smiled. "You'll get the notice." I glanced down the street. My neighbor Sam, a retired postal carrier, was trimming his hedges. He shook his head slowly. "They fined me for a bird feeder," he muttered when I walked over. "Said it attracts squirrels. I told them I like squirrels." I learned the board had 5 members. Deborah as president, her brother-in-law as treasurer, 2 empty seats, and a secretary who'd resigned after a disagreement. Their bylaws allowed special assessments with a 2/3 board vote, no homeowner input. That's how they funded the decor compliance program. $40,000 of cameras and a golf cart labeled Security Patrol. The first meeting I attended was in the rec hall, fluorescent lights buzzing. Deborah banged a gavel she'd bought herself. When I asked for financials, she said, "Not tonight, Mark. You're out of order." I replied, "Order's exactly what I'm asking for." The room chuckled. She didn't. I left with a copy of the CCRs, 83 pages of lawyer English. Page 63 stopped me cold. Decor compliance fees shall sunset 5 years after initial adoption unless renewed by full community vote. The program began in 2016. It was now 2022. Nobody had voted. That night, I opened a fresh notebook and wrote 3 lines. 1. Fee expired. 2. Money collected anyway. True. Need proof. Jenna looked over my shoulder. "You're going to build a case, aren't you?" I kissed her forehead. "I'm going to build a timeline." The next morning, I started at the county clerk's office. The clerk, Mrs. Ramos, handed me a worn binder labeled Birch Hollow Association Filings. Inside were renewals for insurance, meeting minutes, and amendments, but nothing about the decor program after 2016. I asked for certified copies, paid $14.50 and walk, and out with paper that felt heavier than it should. Knowledge nugget number 1. In most U.S. states, an HOA can't legally collect or enforce an expired covenant. Continuing to do so can constitute unauthorized assessments, a civil and sometimes criminal exposure. Back home, I scanned every page, labeled them by date, and tucked them into a red file box. Jenna watched from the couch, wrapped in a blanket. "You're smiling again," she said softly. "Feels good to measure something that's been hurting people," I said. A week later, Deborah sent another notice. Late fee, $75. Threat of lien if unpaid after 30 days. That's when I decided to attend the next open meeting, not as a homeowner, but as an engineer with documentation. I showed up in my county issue work jacket, the one with a small metal badge stitched over the chest, Infrastructure Compliance Consultant. Deborah glanced at it, mistook it for a sheriff's star, and paled for a split second. "Are you here in an official capacity?" she asked. "Just as a resident," I said, letting the silence breathe. The meeting dragged for an hour until I raised my hand. "Quick question," I said. "Has the board renewed the Decor Compliance Covenant since 2016? Her pen froze mid-air. "Of course. Can we see the vote record?" She shuffled papers. "It's in archives. County shows none filed," I said, laying a certified copy of the record on the table. Her eyes darted to the other members. Someone coughed. The treasurer muttered, "We'll have to check with legal." I stood, collected my paper, and said evenly, "Do that. You're 5 years past your authority." The room went silent. That night, Sam texted me a photo of his new violation notice, unauthorized yard sign. It was the Support Local Veterans banner he'd had for 10 years. "They're retaliating," he wrote. "Document everything," I replied. Time, date, signature. And I started counting days. 30 left on my lien threat slaw. Ock. By day 15, Birch Hollow looked like a subdivision under siege. Bright orange notices flapped on mailboxes up and down the street. You could tell which homes had asked questions. Their grass suddenly didn't meet standard, their trash bins visible from street view. The board was tightening its grip. I started driving the loop every evening after work, noting dates, addresses, and code numbers printed on each citation. I logged 52 within a week. Jenna watched me load the photos onto a spreadsheet and said, "You're building a war map." "Evidence," I corrected. "Wars break things. I'm fixing one." Deborah sent me an email at 6:14 a.m. on April 3rd. "Cease and desist your harassment of board members. Unlawful documentation of private property may result in police involvement." I read it twice, smiled and replied, "All photos taken from public easement in compliance with Georgia Code, Favor 16-11-62. 10 minutes later she replied, "We'll see." At 8 p.m. that night a sheriff's cruiser rolled up. Deputy Klein, a calm man with tired eyes. "Got a call about possible harassment," he said, leaning on his flashlight. I handed him a binder. "Every picture from public property, every timestamp right here." He flipped through, nodded. "You're clean. I'll note it." When he left, Jenna exhaled. "You could have been arrested." "I could have been bullied," I said. "There's a difference." Early the next morning, I met Sam and another neighbor, Linda Torres, at the diner off Highway 9. She slid a folder across the booth. "I'm a CPA," she said. "I helped the last treasurer before he quit." Deborah reclassified maintenance funds as community enhancement. That's how she paid for the cameras. Inside were printouts, checks to a company called Holt Property Services, LLC. Same last name. "Conflict of interest," I whispered. Linda nodded. "Nobody listened when I said it last year." We ordered more coffee, started marking up a chart, payments, dates, vote counts, all linked to Deborah's relatives. Knowledge. Nugget number 2. Under Georgia's Nonprofit Corporation Act, any HOA board member must recuse themselves from voting on contracts that provide direct or indirect financial benefit. Failure to disclose can void the contract and trigger state penalties. 2 booths away, a man in a brown jacket pretended to read a menu while eavesdropping. I recognized him, one of the board's security volunteers. He left before his food came. Within an hour, Deborah emailed another warning. Unauthorized meeting of non-board members to discuss association finances is prohibited. Sam grinned. "She's watching the watchers." That's when I decided we needed to go deeper, not just expose misuse, but find something that legally cornered them. I took a week off work, filed open records requests for building permits and right-of-way surveys. County archives smelled of dust and toner. I found that the HOA's so-called Decor Compliance Zone included 22 feet of land that wasn't theirs. It was municipal shoreline easement, public access by law. If they'd issued fines on that strip, those fines were void, and they had. When I told Linda, she whispered, "That's your wedge." Before acting, I wanted counsel. I met an attorney named Patrick Rowe, mid-40s, frayed briefcase, thermos coffee that smelled like diesel. He listened, flipped through my folder and said, "Mark, you've got them. But don't warn them yet. Let them violate one more time after you document the easement, then you own the leverage." He outlined a simple plan. Establish a timeline, then file a notice of potential claim to preserve rights. Quietly, no fanfare. Meanwhile, Deborah's tone sharpened. A new notice arrived. Noise complaint. Power tools used after 7 p.m. The tool was my laptop charger humming on the porch outlet. The retaliation pattern was obvious. Sam got cited for unsightly hose storage. Linda's mail. Box post was structurally unsafe. I collected every one. During that week, I also dropped our HOA payment into certified escrow. No skipping dues, no law-breaking. Lawful resistance only. One evening, while scanning invoices, I found a peculiar line item. Lakefront maintenance, $8,000. Vendor ID numbered BHA3D. The vendor address matched Deborah's home. That night, I sat on the dock under a sodium light. Lake glassy as slate. I could hear frogs, the hum of distant traffic, and Jenna's soft voice behind me. "You're shaking." "Adrenaline," I said. "I'm close." She put a hand on my shoulder. "Promise me you'll stop before they take more from you than money." I looked at the rippling reflection of our porch light. If they touch what's ours, that's the line. Mid-month meeting came faster than expected. Deborah announced, due to ongoing harassment, board reserves right to immediate enforcement. She motioned to a motion, expulsion of any homeowner who disrupts harmony. I raised my hand. "Madam President, you lack authority to expel owners from property they own." Her lips tightened. "Security, please note Mr. Ellison's disruption." I smiled calmly. "Noted and recorded, per state law." I tapped my phone, already flashing the one-party consent disclaimer on screen. That drew a few whispers. Outside, Sam caught up. "You sure you can use that recording?" "Georgia's one-party consent," I said. "Perfectly legal." He grinned. "You think like an engineer and a lawyer. I think like a homeowner with a mortgage." Before we parted, I said, "Next meeting's ours. But we wait. Let them step twice." He nodded, half smiling. "I'll bring coffee and a camera." Halfway home, headlights flared in my rearview mirror, trailing close for 2 miles before turning off near the lake road. HOA patrol. My pulse ticked. I parked, left the engine running, watched our porch light flicker. On, Jenna waiting. Inside, I locked the door, backed up my files to 2 drives, labeled them BH Proof 1 and BH Proof 2. Then I wrote a single note to myself. Leverage matures in 7 days. On the 6th day, the lake shimmered like a mirror, and Deborah finally crossed the line I'd been waiting for. She issued a $500 citation for unauthorized use of community shoreline, specifically noting dock cleaning beyond property boundary. The time-stamped photos attached to her email showed me standing on the public easement, 31 feet from my property line, exactly where I wanted her to prove control. That single act turned the leverage from theory to asset. Patrick, my attorney, said, "You've got a documented overreach. File your claim, but quietly. Don't give them a headline yet." We met at his small downtown office above a print shop. Paper smell thick as ink. He drafted a notice of intent to file civil claim under County Ordinance 12305, citing improper fee collection and trespass of governance authority. It was 4 pages, crisp and surgical. He sealed it with a notary stamp that thunked against the wood desk, a sound I still remember. "Serve it by certified mail," he said. "Let it breathe. 10 business days of silence equals implied acknowledgement." I left the office with that envelope like it was a loaded weapon. That evening, I walked the neighborhood again. Sam met me halfway down the street, flashlight beam bouncing off his mailbox. "You really think this'll work?" "It's not about thinking," I said. "It's about process." We passed Linda's house. She'd taped her latest citation to the window like a protest flag. Improper mulch border. She'd written across it in marker, "Come dig it yourself." I laughed out loud. She's got spirit. Sam chuckled. Spirit and a lawyer's daughter. We were starting to form a small resistance. Lawful, documented, meticulous. That night, while scanning another set of documents, I included a margin note in red. HOA silence window closes. May 12th, 5:00 p.m. I set a countdown on my phone. 9 days, 14 hours, 21 minutes. Utes. Halfway through that window, new letters arrived. 3 separate homeowners fined for attending unsanctioned gatherings. They'd been at my house for coffee. I could almost hear Deborah dictating those citations, voice sharp as cut glass. She wanted to isolate us. I decided to push back with precision. Using my engineering license, I pulled the association's original plat map. The coordinates didn't lie. The so-called private shoreline extended 44 feet into city jurisdiction. That was my proof. Knowledge nugget number 3, municipal easements, once dedicated and accepted, remain public domain regardless of subsequent HOA maintenance claims. Any attempt to charge fees or restrict access on that land constitutes unauthorized encroachment. By day 8, rumors spread. Some residents whispered about a coming lawsuit. Others said I'd bought the lake. I didn't correct them. Silence worked better. Linda texted me a screenshot from the HOA Facebook page. A blurry photo of my truck captioned, "Troublemaker alert," comment thread full of half-truths and emojis. She added, "Want me to reply?" "No," I wrote. "Let them talk." The next morning, I printed 3 enlarged photos, one of the dock sign, private access, one of the city plat stamp, public shoreline, and one of Deborah herself taking pictures beyond the property stake. Visual proof for the record. I stored them in a binder labeled Exhibit Prep. Jenna was folding laundry when I came in. "You're building an arsenal," she said gently. "I'm building accountability," I answered. "Same materials, different purpose." The last night before the deadline, rain hit the roof in waves. I couldn't sleep. The file box sat on the kitchen table like a living thing. I opened it once more, double-checking seals and receipts. Everything airtight. At 7:42 the next morning, deadline day, Patrick called. "They've responded," he said. "How?" "They filed a counter notice claiming all records were in compliance and accusing you of defamation. They CC'd the city attorney." I exhaled. "Perfect." He paused. "You wanted them to do that?" "Yes," I said. "Now it's public record." That afternoon I drove to City Hall. The clerk recognized my name instantly. "You're the one with the shoreline dispute," she said. "Just here to confirm jurisdiction," I replied. She printed a one-page statement stamped in blue. "Easement Parcel 14B, public right of access, maintained by municipality since 1988. I framed that paper in a clear sleeve and laid it flat on my desk at home. Proof, not opinion. Sam came by after sunset wearing his old postal jacket. "So what happens now?" "Now," I said, "we wait for them to overplay their next card." He sipped coffee, stared at the framed document. "Feels like we're in a movie." "Just a community meeting with better lighting," I said. Before leaving, he turned at the door. "If they come after you again, I'll testify. Promise." The next day, Deborah called an emergency HOA session. No homeowners allowed, no agenda posted. I watched from the parking lot as board members carried boxes inside. When they emerged an hour later, they looked rattled. Linda texted me that night. "Heard from my friend on the inside. They're planning to revoke your membership privileges." I smiled. "They can't revoke ownership." She wrote back, "Then what are you going to do?" "Wait 48 hours, I typed. "Then the dock becomes the stage." Comment question time for anyone still reading this far. How far should an HOA really be allowed to control property you legally own? Where's that line? Decorum or domination? Tell me what you think below. When the 48 hours passed, I stood on the dock with the city easement statement in my hand, camera rolling, microphone clipped to my collar. Rain clouds, built overhead. I could hear the faint whine of the patrol cart approaching from the main road. The golf cart came rolling down the dock, its tires humming on the wet boards, Deborah at the wheel in her red rain jacket, clipboard clamped under one arm like a badge. She stopped a few feet away, eyes narrowed. "You're trespassing on HOA property, Mark." "According to this," I said, holding up the laminated easement map, "I'm standing on city land. Want to read the seal?" She didn't glance at it. "Put the paper down and step back to your parcel. Last warning." I kept my tone even. "You're issuing citations on land you don't own. That's called unlawful enforcement. You might want your counsel present before you add another line to your record." Her lips tightened. "We'll see what our attorney says about this stunt." Lightning cracked somewhere over the lake. The sound hit a second later like a drum. I felt the vibration under the planks. Deborah turned her cart around and sped off, tires spitting water. I let the camera roll until the cart disappeared, then closed the clip with a simple line. Day 47, unauthorized enforcement attempt recorded. That night, I sent the footage to Patrick. He replied within an hour. Perfect chain of custody. Let's make them step in front of an audience. The May meeting was only 4 days away, and the board had already posted their smug agenda online. Item 3. Discussion of ongoing non-compliance case. Ellison. I smiled at the screen. They'd made it public. The next morning, I dropped by Sam's porch. He was whittling a piece of cedar, coffee steaming in a chipped USPS Forever mug. "They're making you the main act," he said. Exactly what I wanted. Linda joined us, carrying a folder thick with resident signatures. 83, almost the whole community. Petition to audit the board's finances, she said. They'll have to address. I'll sit in the same meeting. Beautiful timing, I said. Let's just stay calm. Let their arrogance do the talking. Knowledge. Nugget number 4. Under most state open meeting laws for common interest communities, once an HOA posts an agenda item naming a resident, the resident gains a right to speak on that item before any vote. It's procedural law, not favor. By Friday, the small hall was standing room only. I wore my county work jacket again, not to provoke, just to remind them of process and precision. Jenna stayed home. Her immune system couldn't handle crowds. Before I left, she pressed her hand to my chest. Whatever happens, don't lose your peace, she said. The hum of conversation inside the hall was electric. Deborah banged the gavel, eyes sweeping the room. This meeting will maintain decorum, she said. Certain residents have spread misinformation about board jurisdiction. I raised my hand. Madam President, that would be me, and I have documentation. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. She hesitated, then gestured stiffly. You have 2 minutes. I stepped to the small podium, laid out the 3 enlarged photos I'd printed earlier, the doc sign, the plat stamp, and Deborah's own photo beyond the stake. These, I said, show the board enforcing rules on city land. Here's the certified statement confirming jurisdiction. And here, I held up the certified mail receipts, are 5 separate citations derived from that enforcement. Each carries an unlawful fee. The room went dead silent. From the back, someone whispered, Wait, so we've been paying for something they don't own? Deborah snapped, That's misinformation. I interrupted, firm but polite. City clerk confirmed the easement. You're welcome to call her Monday morning. I already gave her your name. She slammed her gavel again. Order. Then came the turning point. Deputy Klein stepped through the door, reins still on his jacket. He raised a hand. Evening, folks. City attorney asked me to observe. We received a copy of a notice of intent filed last week regarding easement enforcement. Just here to ensure compliance tonight. That sentence changed everything. The murmuring grew. Phones lifted to record. Deborah's face paled. This is a private association meeting. Klein shook his head. Once you posted that agenda publicly, ma'am, it's subject to open meeting provision 4708. He walked up beside me, eyes calm. Mr. Ellison, you said you had the city's jurisdiction statement. I handed him the sleeve. He glanced, nodded, then spoke into his lapel mic. Confirmed. Easement parcel is municipal. All enforcement actions there are suspended pending review. The sound of his voice on that mic, calm, official, irrevocable, was better than any soundtrack. Deborah sputtered, This is outrageous. Klein cut her off gently. Ma'am, you may wish to pause further fines until council reviews the record. I turned to the crowd. That's all I needed. Thank you for your time. As I stepped back, people clapped, tentative at first, then louder. The board adjourned in chaos. Outside, rain eased into mist. Sam clapped me on the shoulder. That was one hell of a show. I exhaled, chest tight. It's not over. But the first wall just cracked. He grinned. Feels like dominoes. I looked back at the hall lights reflecting on the wet asphalt. Yeah, dominoes. So for anyone watching, what's your take on HOAs posting public names for punishment? Transparency or public shaming? Drop your thoughts. I read every one. The next morning, my inbox exploded. Residents wanted copies of the documents, links to statutes, even templates for formal record requests. The local news blog called me the engineer who outranked the HOA. Patrick laughed when I told him. "Keep your head down," he said. "They'll regroup. Let them. That's when you press for reform." "Reform," I echoed. "Not revenge." Still, part of me knew Deborah wasn't done. She'd lost control in public. She'd find another way to retaliate. 3 nights later, at 11:42 p.m., headlights swept across our driveway again. A car idled for 2 minutes, then left. The next morning, a bright yellow slip fluttered under my wiper blade. "Parking violation. Vehicle facing wrong direction." It was nonsense, but it was a message. I picked it up, smiled faintly, and said to myself, "You're making my case stronger." By June, the pattern of retaliation was its own weather system. Predictable, suffocating, almost rhythmic. A new citation every Tuesday, a rumor by Thursday, and a mysterious inspection on weekends. They thought they were wearing me down. They didn't realize they were timestamping their own misconduct. Jenna started keeping a small calendar by the fridge, red dots for every violation slip, blue dots for when we filed rebuttals. By the end of the month, the fridge looked like a mosaic of stress. One afternoon, I came home to find her sitting on the porch with a folded paper trembling in her hands. "They sent a wellness check," she said. "Said they heard screaming." I blinked. From who? The HOA security volunteer. He claimed I sounded distressed. The sheriff's deputy who showed up was the same kind man, Klein. He looked embarrassed. "Mark, sorry about this," he said quietly. "No cause for concern here, I know, but they filed it as a welfare check under community safety." After he left, Jenna whispered, "They're using the law now." I sat beside her. "Then we'll use it better." I documented the visit down to the minute. 4:16 p.m. Arrival. 4:28 p.m. Departure. Deputy badge, number 3412. I copied the incident number straight from his notepad. Over dinner, Sam texted, "Got hit with a trash can visibility fine. They're doubling down." Linda added, "Same here. $200 for wind chimes." We started a group thread we jokingly called the penalized. Every new ticket became an exhibit, every date a bullet point. I started color-coding the spreadsheet: orange for financial overreach, green for harassment, red for false claims. By mid-July, I had 78 entries. That's when the board sent a formal intent to lien letter. The envelope was thick, printed on embossed paper, and smelled faintly of Deborah's perfume, vanilla, and authority. Inside, failure to comply with HOA fee schedule may result in property lien after 14 days. I read it twice, then set it under the kitchen light. "Perfect," I said aloud. Jenna looked up. "Perfect?" "They're triggering the escrow clause. Time for leverage." She frowned. "Just don't let this swallow you." I smiled weakly. "It's not about winning anymore. It's about restoring balance." That night, I drove to the diner again. Sam was already there, same booth, same chipped mug. Linda joined, her eyes tired but sharp. "They're desperate," she said. "Deborah's brother-in-law tried to get me fired from my accounting job, called my boss saying I was leaking client data." My fists clenched under the table. "Defamation," I said. "Keep the voicemail." She nodded. "Already forwarded it." I told them my plan. "We'll let the lien notice mature for 7 days. Then I'll reveal what I've been holding." Sam squinted. "What's that?" I slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were copies of a quiet purchase agreement from 3 months ago, an LLC I'd set up under the name Hollow Holdings. Through it, I'd legally acquired the narrow maintenance parcel that connected the HOA security gate to the main road. Linda's jaw dropped. "You own the entrance?" "Technically, the LLC does, but yes." Sam's grin spread slow. "That's your secret leverage." "Exactly. Without access, they can't enforce anything, not without a recorded easement, which expired last year. They never renewed." Linda let out a low whistle. "You've been playing chess, just engineering." Knowledge nugget number 5. A private HOA that fails to renew or maintain legal ingress-egress easements can lose enforcement authority beyond its controlled parcels. No access, no jurisdiction. It's Property Law 101. For the next week, I watched in silence as the HOA mailed out its threats, unaware that the very road their trucks used to deliver them now belonged to me. On day 8, the certified lien notice arrived. Official, heavy, self-incriminating. I placed it gently into the evidence box, right on top. That evening, the rain returned. I set up my camera facing the gate, slow drizzle catching light from the street lamps. At 9 p.m. sharp, a board member arrived to post a new sign, "Private access, authorized HOA vehicles only." I stepped out with my umbrella and said evenly, "You're posting that on private property." He turned. "It's association land." "Not anymore." I handed him the recorded deed from the county clerk. His eyes darted across the header, saw Hollow Holdings LLC and my name below it. He muttered, "You're joking." "Not even a little." When he drove off, I stood there listening to the rain hit the metal gate, each drop like a countdown tick. At home, Jenna met me at the door. "You look lighter," she said. "Because tomorrow," I said, "they walk straight into their own meeting and realize I own the front door." She smiled faintly. "Make it count, Mark." That night, I barely slept. My laptop screen glowed with the slideshow I'd built. Photos, deeds, timestamps, a single slide titled "Transfer of Control Point, 17A Access Road." Outside, lightning flickered across the lake. The air smelled of wet cedar and ozone, the kind of air that tells you change is about to break. For those watching, fines, liens, inspections. When does enforcement become harassment? Where should homeowners draw that line? Comment below. It's your real-world vote. At sunrise, I buttoned my jacket, grabbed the folder, and whispered to Jenna, "Endgame." She nodded, eyes bright with fatigue and pride. Then I walked out into the humid morning toward the hall, where the board didn't yet know they'd just lost their leverage to a line of ink and a signature. The meeting hall smelled like burnt coffee and wet carpet when I walked in. About 40 residents sat scattered among the folding chairs, murmuring. Deborah was at the front, gavel poised, chin high, pretending she'd already won something. She began in that clipped, rehearsed tone. "Before we proceed to community concerns, the board will address Mr. Ellison's continued non-payment and obstruction." I didn't flinch. "You mean the escrowed payments held under Georgia Code 443225, perfectly lawful?" Her jaw tensed. "Sir, you have no standing to lecture this board on law." "I have a deed," I said quietly, setting the manila folder on the table. Her eyes flicked down. "What deed?" I opened it, slid out the recorded transfer. The county stamp shone blue under the fluorescent light. Parcel 17A, Access Road, purchased by Hollow Holdings LLC, recorded 2 months ago. The parcel your security gate sits on. The murmurs grew louder. Chairs squeaked as people leaned forward. "You bought our gate?" someone whispered. Deborah blinked, color draining from her face. "That's impossible. That parcel's ours." "Was," I corrected. "Your easement expired March 31st, 2022. No renewal filed. County treated it as surplus and auctioned it. I bid $1 over minimum." A collective gasp rippled across the room. From the back, Sam muttered, "That's one expensive dollar." I kept my voice calm. "I didn't buy it to close you off. I bought it to prove you can't control what you don't legally maintain. Same mistake you made with the shoreline." Deborah tried to rally. "This is extortion." "Correction," I said. "This is ownership." At that, the treasurer leaned toward her. "Deb, if this is true, we've been charging gate fees on someone else's property." Her hands trembled as she rifled through papers. You can't just revoke access." "I haven't," I said. "Not yet." Patrick stepped through the door just then. No suit, just khakis and his old briefcase. He raised his voice enough for the crowd. "For clarity, under County Record 220143, Mr. Ellison's LLC holds the access parcel. He's within his rights to post or regulate entry, but he's chosen not to, for now." The room buzzed. Deborah's gavel clattered from her hand onto the table. That's when I reached into my pocket and placed a small laminated sign on the table. "Public access easement under review. No HOA enforcement authority." "Consider this a courtesy notice," I said. "Effective immediately. You'll cease fines and patrol operations through that gate until the county reviews the easement." Her mouth opened, then closed. Deputy Klein, stationed by the door again, stepped forward. "He's right, ma'am. City confirmed the transfer this morning. Until an agreement's filed, you can't enforce entry restrictions. Deborah's brother-in-law muttered, "We're done." "You're suspended pending audit," she snapped at him, but the damage was visible, hands shaking, her authority slipping one syllable at a time. Outside, thunder rolled low across the hills. The windows rattled faintly. I leaned toward the mic. "I'm not here to destroy Birch Hollow. I'm here to make it honest. The only thing I ask is transparency, open books, fair votes, term limits, and recorded meetings. You fix those, I'll restore the easement." A voice from the back shouted, "Let him finish." Deborah tried to speak, but her words came out thin. "You're blackmailing us with property." Patrick answered before I could. "It's called negotiation, ma'am. Perfectly lawful." Then, as if the universe wanted punctuation, the power flickered. For a heartbeat, only the rain was audible, steady, cleansing. I looked across the room, met Linda's eyes, then Sam's. Both of them nodded, subtle but certain. That was the moment I knew the first reversal was complete. The secret leverage had shifted the ground beneath their feet. After the meeting, residents crowded the hallway, shaking my hand, whispering thank yous, pressing copies of their notices into my arms. One woman said, "You gave us back our voices." I smiled, exhausted. Now we use them wisely. Sam walked beside me into the damp night. "You think she'll step down?" "She'll fight," I said. "But the narrative's changed. Public opinion's an unmovable gate." He chuckled. "You're starting to sound like a politician." "I prefer engineer. Politicians talk, engineers fix." For everyone following this story, how far should property rights go before they turn into power plays? Would you have bought the parcel or taken them straight to court? Tell me below. The next morning, a letter appeared in my mailbox. Not certified, just handwritten. Inside, "You've made a big mistake. Watch your back." No signature. The handwriting curved feminine, but I couldn't prove it was hers. Jenna found me reading it. "You're scaring them," she said. "Fear's a short-term fuel," I replied. "Reform's the destination." That evening, I typed up a formal offer to the board. Restore access rights in exchange for binding governance reforms, term limits, public audits, transparent elections. I printed 2 copies, notarized them, and slid one under Deborah's door. As I walked back through the drizzle, I noticed porch lights flicking on one by one across the street, tiny signals in the dark, as if the whole community was starting to wake up. The morning after I slid that reform proposal under Deborah's door, the neighborhood smelled of rain and thawed soil. By 8 a.m. the board's email went out. An emergency community meeting, open to all residents. Subject line, discussion of infrastructure ownership. I knew exactly what that meant. By 5 o'clock, cars lined both sides of Birch Hollow Drive. People who'd avoided meetings for years showed up carrying copies of their violation letters, ready to see blood. I wasn't interested in humiliation, but in clarity. Inside, the hall buzzed with the same nervous electricity I'd felt before a structural load test, everyone waiting to see what would crack first. Deborah stood behind the podium, shoulders stiff, papers perfectly squared. She started calm, almost apologetic. "We've had misunderstandings," she said. "Mr. Ellison's acquisition of Parcel 17A raises complicated legal questions. The board intends to pursue reacquisition through counsel." I waited, letting her finish her rehearsed paragraph about continuity of access and community stability. Then I rose, carrying a small stack of printed pages. "I'll save everyone time," I said, voice steady. "What you call reacquisition, the county calls negotiation. The offer stands. Restore democratic procedures and transparency, and I'll deed the parcel back at cost." Deborah smiled a brittle smile. "And if we refuse?" "Then your vehicles enter private property every day without consent." The room erupted. Gasps, mutters, a few claps. Deborah banged the gavel. "Order!" A man near the back shouted, "He's offering reform, take it!" That's when the neutral authority walked in, not Klein this time, but a city inspector named Mr. Gartus. Gray hair, clipboard tucked under one arm. "Evening," he said in a voice like gravel. "County sent me to confirm site control. Mr. Ellison, your deed's valid through August unless renewed. Mrs. Holt, your board can't operate or maintain that gate until the easement is reestablished. Her face turned the shade of unbaked clay. "You can't just—" Garvey raised a hand. "Not opinion, ma'am. Procedure." He checked his watch, then looked straight at me. "Any objections to keeping the gate open for emergency access only?" "None," I said. He turned to the room. "Then this is the arrangement until legal realignment. Carry on." When he left, the murmurs were louder. People recording on their phones, whispering to each other. I stepped to the mic again. "This isn't about one gate or one road. It's about trust. If this board can't follow its own bylaws, it doesn't deserve to control your homes." Someone called out, "Vote them out." Deborah tried one last gambit. "Mr. Ellison, you're destabilizing property values." I met her stare. "No, ma'am. You did that the moment you made this community fear its own mailbox." That broke the dam. Applause, cheers, phones lifted high. Sam grinned from the second row, and Linda wiped tears she didn't bother hiding. The next 48 hours moved fast. 3 board members resigned by email. The local paper ran a headline, "HOA authority challenged over property control." Deborah clung to her post, claiming she'd temporarily step back while auditors reviewed the books. I wasn't finished yet. I sent copies of every document to the county's compliance division, CC'd the state consumer affairs office, and uploaded redacted versions to a public drive for residents. By week's end, Birch Hollow's insurer had suspended coverage pending investigation, standard when governance legitimacy is questioned. The remaining board issued a desperate newsletter blaming technical errors. Neighbors started stopping me at the mailbox again, but not with complaints. Thank yous, offers to help draft new bylaws, cookies left on the porch. For the first time in a year, people smiled walking their dogs. Sam joined me on the dock one evening, the lake glassy and orange under sunset. He nudged me with his elbow. "You realize you're the accidental mayor of this place now?" I laughed quietly. "I'm just the guy who bought the driveway." "But you built the bridge," he said. I looked out across the water, thought about Jenna inside resting, about the slow return of quiet. "Funny thing about bridges," I said. "They only matter if people cross." He nodded, then raised an eyebrow. "So what's next? They still have the bylaws from the Reagan era." "That's next week's project," I said. "We turn leverage into reform." For anyone following this far, what's your take? Should HOAs be forced to publish budgets and term limits or keep internal control? Where's the line between privacy and accountability? Drop your answer below. That night, I drafted the formal reform terms. 4 pages, clear as daylight. 2 term limits for officers. Open book audits posted quarterly. 72-hour notice for inspections. Community vote thresholds raised to 60%. Children's Park Fund reinstated. I titled it The Hollow Charter. I printed copies for every mailbox, signed only, from one neighbor who's had enough. As I slid the last envelope into place under the street lamp, the light flickered, rain beginning again, soft and persistent, like the sound of renewal. 2 days later, the HOA mailbox was full, white envelopes with my printed charter folded inside. By noon, 27 neighbors had signed a petition calling for a special election. That was the moment Birch Hollow stopped being a collection of homes and became a community again. I woke early that Sunday, the air heavy with summer humidity and cut grass. From the porch, I could see people walking to the hall, papers tucked under arms. Jenna came out in her robe, weak but smiling. "Go finish it," she said. "Then come home." Inside the hall, Deborah was already there, flanked by 2 lawyers and a box of binders. Her face was drawn, her composure brittle. The air smelled of copier toner and sweat. The crowd filled every seat, standing along the walls. I took the microphone without waiting for permission. "Neighbors," I said, "for a year we've been told our homes were liabilities to be fined, inspected, or surveilled. Today, they're our proof of ownership. You paid for this place twice, once with your mortgage, once with your patience." Deborah's lawyer whispered something to her, but she lifted her chin and spoke into her mic. "Mr. Ellison, this meeting is out of order." I laid my folder open. "Actually, it's perfectly in order. Per Section 4.07 of the CCRs, 25 signatures can call a reform vote. We have 47. Motion stands." Applause thundered. She tried to gavel it down, but the crowd drowned her out. Sam rose from the back, waving a sheaf of papers. Here's your petition, Mark. All signed, all notarized. I took them, handed them to the city inspector, Mr. Garvey, who'd come to witness. He read the header, then nodded. Procedurally valid. Board must acknowledge motion or vacate authority. Deborah's voice cracked. You can't just replace governance overnight? Garvey sighed. No one's replacing it. They're reforming it. There's a difference. I looked at her and said gently, You built rules to protect your comfort. We're building them to protect each other. Silence hung in the room for a long second. Then she sat down. That was the sound of authority collapsing. Not with violence, but gravity. The motion passed by unanimous voice vote. We named an interim co. Amity, Linda as treasurer, Sam as community liaison, 3 others from the crowd. I walked outside with Garvey afterward. He adjusted his glasses. You handled it cleaner than most towns do. Engineering principle, I said. Tension resolves when the weakest joint gives first. He chuckled. You'll make a fine civic planner if you ever get bored of construction. That evening, the rain came again. Gentler this time. I sat with Jenna on the porch, watching drops blur the reflection of the gate lights. She leaned her head on my shoulder. You look different, she said. Maybe because I finally stopped fighting them, I said. Started building us. A week later, the local paper ran another headline. Birch Hollow HOA adopts transparency charter after resident action. The article listed the reforms word for word. Term limits, open records, independent audits. Deborah had resigned for personal reasons. The insurer reinstated coverage. The city closed its investigation with a short note. All compliance issues resolved. We held a community barbecue on the lakefront. Kids splashed in the shallows. The air smelled of charcoal and fresh corn. Someone hung a banner that read, Welcome Home, painted in red and blue. At sunset, Sam handed me a lighter. You should do the honors. I smiled, knelt by the small metal fire pit, and fed the last stack of old violation notices into the flame. They curled, blackened, and lifted as ash. Feels good? He asked. Better than any fine I've ever paid. Before I left, Linda tapped my arm. What'll you do now? I looked around at the laughter, the easy conversation, the sound of the lake lapping against the dock. Keep an eye on the next neighborhood that forgets who it belongs to. For those of you who believe I fought the right way and that this is how it should end, say a few words in the comments for your friend. Subscribe so future stories reach you first, and share this so others learn how to stand up with but burning down. That part's on all of us. The next morning, the mailbox held one last envelope, this time from the county. It was the renewal notice for the access parcel, due for reassignment. I smiled, filled in the line that granted permanent public right-of-way to Birch Hollow Homeowners Association, signed, and stamped it. When I set it on the counter, Jenna asked softly, You're giving it back? It was never about keeping it, I said. It was about making sure they earned it. Outside, the porch light reflected off the new metal plate on the gate, engraved simply, Public access maintained by Birch Hollow Charter, Esther 2023. The reflection looked like dawn on water, and in the quiet, I heard myself whisper, Next case.